and welcome back to another wonderful video. Today I'm here on my gamer island. The reason why is because I want to teach you all some tips and some ideas and some just overall advice to making your own games. This will apply to Ponytown because we're in Ponytown, but it will technically also apply to outside of Ponytown if you're wanting to make a game yourself on paper that you want to ultimately publish or do whatever else with. So these tips are going to help you with a lot of things, but personally we're going to be using Ponytown as an example as our base because we're a Ponytown channel essentially, and these are all games that you can play in Ponytown, and it will also be a little bit more limited for Ponytown's sake. Starting out by asking yourself a question: do I want this to be a party game? Do I want this to be a simple linear path? Do I want this to be some kind of thing similar to chess or something like that? What do I want to do? Typically what I do is I will just be like, oh, okay, I want to make this kind of game where it's like it's one player versus one player and they're battling it out for whatever else, and then I will take something like carpet or some other random thing and I'll just draw some shapes out and just be like, okay, we obviously need it to be even, so if we're doing a 1v1 thing, both sides need to be perfectly evened, perfectly balanced. So if I do something like this on this side, then this player on this side also needs the same exact thing, because otherwise that would be unbalanced and thus be unfair. Unless both players started on one end, then it would be fair. And if it was something like, okay, I get this side, you get the right side, then it would be fair because it would be even. But in this example, it would be something like up and down. So if I did like this, that's still not even, so I need another one there. Basically, if you're doing a 1v1 game, similar to chess, checkers, barricade checkers, whatever else you can think of, nine men's Morris, those kinds of things, it needs to be even and it needs to be balanced. Otherwise, it would be completely unfair, because what do these two little pegs here do on the ends? I don't know yet, but if my opponent has them, then I want them too, otherwise it's not very fair. So keep that in mind if you're doing something like that. But if you're doing something like a simple little game where it's like, oh, we're just gonna do a linear path, similar to like Candyland or Monopoly or something like that, you can draw out a little square or just not even bother with the square and just go ahead and grid it out. Similar to this game down below me. You can use bigger things or you can use smaller things. It just really depends on you and your preference. So maybe we do something like this, or maybe we decide to split something down the middle. Oh, what does that do? Maybe it's a shortcut to get back up here. So if you land on this space, you get all the way down or something like that. I don't know. But the idea is simply just draw out some shapes, and then ultimately something will come up to you. Then just draw out some shapes and stuff like that, and something will eventually come up to you, and you'll eventually come up with an idea. So like, what about this? What if it's just like a figure eight type thing? So we start here and we go all the way around, and then we come back up this way eventually, and then we go this way, and then we come back this way, and figure eight all the way across, and just keep doing a figure eight type thing. Let's just start with that, for example. Once you have like a little shape figured out or whatever, you can start gridding it out. So you can grab like a blue and a purple, or just two different colors. I normally use black and white, so just use black and white and you can grid out this entire thing. So now that you have this sort of thing gridded out, the reason why I recommend you just doodling something out like I did earlier with stone instead of like this grid pattern here is because you're probably going to delete it a bunch. So I don't really like to grid this out too much until after I figured out like the kind of shape I want the board to be. Now keep in mind that this is still technically your rough draft. This board right here will eventually change, most likely. It will most likely change anyway. I'm not going to say it will 100%, but it will 99.9% of the time. It will change, either because you decided to add something, because you decided to remove something, because you decided that the board is too short, because you decided it was too long, etc., etc. There's many reasons why you might decide to eventually change your board, so don't get too attached, even though it took you like 2 or 3 minutes straight to grid this out properly. Now that we have our little shape here and everything like that, and we've decided like this is going to be our shape for testing and figuring out mechanics and stuff like that, now you have to ask yourself, what kind of mechanics do you want? Do you want dice? Do you want strategy? Do you want luck? What exactly do you want? Personally, I like to use dice, and when I like to use dice, I like to stick with rolling out of 6 or rolling out of 12. The reason why is because in real life, there's no 9-sided dice. There's no like 3-sided dice or something like that. So you kind of typically would want to stick with 6 and 12, maybe even 20 if you want to do a specific kind of game, because there are 20-sided dice, maybe even 10 if you wanted to do that, because there are 10-sided dice and stuff like that. But that's besides the point. The point is the standard is 6 and 12, so that's what I personally like to keep up with. However, since we're using Ponytown as our example, we could technically tweak this as much as we wanted. If you wanted, you can have it to where your players are going 13 spaces at a time, or 9 spaces at a time, or something like that, or rolling out of 13 and whatever. That's besides the point. That's up to you. The point is, just figure out a number and try to base it based on how big your board is. Currently, our board isn't exactly the longest or the biggest, so we'll start with rolling out of 6, and later on during testing and stuff like that, if we determine that 6 is just too short, we'll bump it up to 12, and then from there we'll determine, hey, 12 is too much and 6 is not enough, maybe we can go somewhere in 9, like right in the middle with 9. Again, that's something you can only really do for Ponytown, but if you're doing this in real life, try to stick with 6 and 12. So now that we figured out that we need dice and we figured out we're going to use 6, let's try and see what else we can add. If this is a simple luck-based game, then the goal would probably be to get all the way back to start with a perfect number or something like that. So you get all the way up here and then you roll a 3, and that's 1, 2, 3. You win because you landed on the last space with an exact roll. Typically, that's how luck-based games work. Usually, they don't necessarily intersect like this, so we would have to eliminate part of the board for this example, but that's besides the point. Luck-based games, in my opinion, are extremely easy, but they're not that fun. For example, we could say we're done right now because the luck is the entire game. The entire game is the luck. So we could say we're done right now with this board game and just walk away and just leave it and never go to it again. But personally, that's pretty boring, that's pretty lame. If you're gonna do a luck-based game, you definitely need to play around with it a little bit more. You need to put some stakes to everything. So maybe, for example, if you land on a log slice, you lose a turn, or if you land on a potted plant or something like that, you go back 3 spaces or something like that. Maybe you want to do things like that, similar to how Candyland does. You can put these around, but I don't recommend putting these necessarily too close unless you want to do something like, oh, you go back 3 turns, then lose a turn or something like that. Maybe you want to do something like that, that's totally fine. But again, don't try to like stack these so high. Don't put like several go back 3 spaces or several lose a turn spaces, especially if your game is just 100% pure luck, because all you're going to do in that case is frustrate the player. At this point, they're going to realize, hey, this game is already only luck-based, and I keep losing turns and I keep going back. This game is going to take me a century to finish. I'm not playing anymore. That's typically what's going to happen. So you don't want to spam these too much, but you definitely probably want to consider adding them and stuff like that, because obviously if I go first, I'm going to have a huge advantage and everything like that, and you obviously don't want the person that goes first to have a huge advantage. So doing something like putting go back 3 spaces and lose a turn spaces is good to prevent that huge player 1 buff. So for your luck-based games, keep that in mind. As well, keep in mind that another thing that you can do for your luck-based games is pull out your shovel again and do little shortcuts. So say I land on this, and if I land on this, I get to go all the way down here. So if I land on this, I could just slide all the way down here and skip all of those spaces. That's another way for you to help with different things. Maybe you even want it to be both ways. So if I land in this space here, I go all the way back. That's a good way to play around with everything like that. I don't necessarily recommend having it where you go back, but I do love it where you go forward, because that will help the game go by quicker, and it will be really fun for players who went last to immediately be at the front. So that's really how I feel about, luck-based games and everything like that. I feel like they're not as exciting as something that would involve strategy. So what I normally do is I normally try to come up with ways to employ strategy to every kind of game. So for example, this game here we had, which was a luck-based game, let's try to combine luck and strategy together to see if we can come up with a better game than we had already. But that is all the time we have for today. We are at 10 minutes on my invisible watch, according to my invisible watch, right, 10 minutes. So I'm going to cut everything out right here and keep you in suspense and in thought for a couple days until part 2 comes out. Part 2 will discuss more on strategy and balancing that out with luck and everything like that to make a much more interesting and exciting game than what we had already. So, I do hope that you enjoyed what you learned so far, and I do hope that you did learn something so far. If you did, or if you have questions about what you did learn, let me know in the comments below, and I will answer that. And, of course, as always, I will be here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with more Ponytown-related content, as well as this type of content, I guess, as well. So let me know what you think of this type of content, you know, where I give you, like, tips of, like, game making and stuff like that. And maybe we can do more in addition to the part 2 that is going to come out in a couple of days. I promise. Anyway, like I said, that's going to do it for the video, and I do hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please do like, subscribe, and share, and do all of those wonderful things. Because when you do those wonderful things, you get access to wonderful content such as this. But that's not all you get. That's not all you get. You also get to become wonderful yourself, and I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.